Welcome back, everyone. Ready to level up our Scrum game. Today, we're doing a deep dive into Scrum Mastery, From Good to Great Servant Leadership by Geoff Watts.
Sounds like a good one.
It's packed with insights for anyone working with Scrum, whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned pro.
The cool thing is Watts goes beyond the typical Scrum Master checklist, just the basic responsibilities.
Okay, so he's not just saying, hey, make sure you run the daily stand-up and keep the backlog groomed.
Exactly. He dives into those deeper skills, that mindset, the stuff that separates a good Scrum Master from a truly great one.
So it's more about leadership than just ticking off boxes.
Totally. He introduces this concept of level 5 leadership for Scrum Masters.
Intriguing. What does that even look like?
Well, he breaks it down into 8 key qualities.
8. Okay, we better buckle up.
The first one is resourceful. And it's not just about problem solving, it's about thinking ahead, anticipating challenges before they even pop up.
So being proactive, not just reactive.
Exactly. It's about preventing fires, not just putting them out.
I like that. Okay, what about the other 7 qualities?
Well, we have enabling, which is all about empowering the team to do their best work, giving them the tools and support they need to thrive.
That makes sense. You can't lead effectively if you're constantly micromanaging.
Right. And then there's tactful, which highlights the importance of diplomacy.
Yeah, guiding the team towards self-organization without being a dictator.
Precisely. It's about subtle influence, not brute force.
Makes sense. So we have resourceful, enabling, and tactful. What's next?
Respected. This one's all about building trust and credibility within the team.
Yeah, you can't lead if the team doesn't respect you.
Exactly. And then we have alternative, which encourages thinking outside the box, challenging the status quo.
I like that. Always questioning, always looking for a better way.
And inspiring, of course, because a great Scrum Master motivates the team to achieve great things.
Right, it's about creating a shared vision, a sense of purpose.
Exactly. So we're up to 6 qualities now.
All right, hit me with the last 2.
Nurturing. This focuses on supporting the growth and development of each team member, fostering a positive and encouraging environment.
Yeah, it's about helping people reach their full potential, not just meeting deadlines.
And finally, empathic.
Empathic. Okay, I'm curious about this one.
It highlights the importance of understanding and responding to the team's emotional needs, not just their practical ones.
So it's about recognizing that people are, well, people, not just cogs in a machine.
Exactly. It's about creating a human-centric work environment.
Wow, that's a pretty comprehensive set of qualities. It sounds like being a great Scrum Master requires a lot more than just knowing the Scrum framework.
It absolutely does. And one of the things that Watts emphasizes is that teams themselves often have a really good sense of who would make a great Scrum Master.
Oh, interesting. You mean beyond titles and hierarchy?
Right. He shares this anecdote about a workshop where he asked participants to elect their own Scrum Master without any input from management.
So no preconceived notions or biases.
Exactly. And consistently, the vast majority of the group selects the same person.
Really? That's fascinating. It's like they instinctively recognize the qualities of a natural leader.
That's what Watts observed. It's almost like there's this unspoken understanding of who can best serve the team.
I'm curious, what kind of qualities did these naturally elected Scrum Masters typically possess? Was it just about being organized or having technical expertise?
It often went beyond that. They tended to be the folks who naturally facilitated discussions, encouraged collaboration, and seemed to really understand the group's needs, even the unspoken ones.
Think about it, right? In your own teams, who embodies those traits? It's not always the loudest voice or the most senior person.
You're right. It might be the quiet observer, the one who can read the room and understand the dynamics.
Exactly. It's that subtle influence, the ability to empower others. That's at the heart of servant leadership.
And Watts uses this phrase that I love, dispensable but wanted.
Dispensable but wanted. Okay, that sounds a bit paradoxical.
It is. It's this idea that a truly great Scrum Master guides the team to a point where they don't need constant direction.
So they become self-sufficient.
Exactly. But crucially, they still want the Scrum Master there.
Because of their insights, their support, their ability to help the team grow.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance, but it's a powerful vision of team development.
But how do you actually get there? How do you guide a team toward that level of self-sufficiency without letting them flounder in the process?
Watts has this brilliant rule for Scrum Masters. First, ask the team.
First, ask the team. Okay, I like that. It sounds simple, but I bet it's harder than it seems.
It definitely takes conscious effort. Whatever the issue is, whatever the question or challenge, the natural instinct is to jump in with solutions.
Right, especially if you're a problem solver by nature.
Exactly. But instead of offering solutions, turn to the team and ask, what do you think we should do about this?
Shifting the ownership, making it their problem to solve.
Exactly. And it might feel a bit uncomfortable at first, but it's crucial for fostering that sense of ownership, that problem-solving ability.
So it's less about being the hero who swoops in to save the day, and more about equipping the team to be their own heroes.
Exactly. It's about guiding their thinking, not dictating their actions.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's more like coaching than managing.
And Watts even compares this approach to the coaching style of Phil Jackson, the legendary NBA coach.
Phil Jackson, okay, now we're talking. He was known for empowering his players to make decisions on the court, even in those high-pressure moments.
Exactly. He trusted them to figure things out, to make the right calls.
Instead of trying to control every aspect of the game.
Right. It's about giving them the space to learn and grow.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of growth, Watts uses some really engaging analogies to illustrate how a Scrum Master can guide a team through different stages of development. He talks about Nanny McPhee and even the Karate Kid.
Right. It's all about the shuhari concept.
Shuhari. I'm not familiar with that.
It's a model for skill development that comes from martial arts, but it applies beautifully to Scrum.
Okay, tell me more. I'm intrigued.
So, in the shu stage, the team is learning the fundamentals. Think of Daniel in The Karate Kid, diligently following Mr. Miyagi's instructions, wax on, wax off.
Wax on, wax off.
So in Scrum terms, this is like meticulously following the Scrum Guide at first.
Think of it as building a solid foundation. The Scrum Master provides clear guidelines, structure, ensuring the team understands the mechanics of the Scrum framework.
Okay, so it's less about rote repetition and more about understanding the purpose behind each practice.
Exactly. For example, the Scrum Master might explain the purpose and structure of each Scrum event, guide the team in creating user stories, or facilitate a smooth sprint review.
Providing that supportive structure while the team absorbs the basics.
Precisely. And as the team moves beyond the basics, they enter the Ha stage.
Okay, what happens in Ha? Do they rebel?
Not quite. They start to question the fundamentals, experiment, adapt. Just like Daniel realizing that wax on, wax off has deeper applications in karate.
They start to see the why behind the Scrum practices.
Exactly, and they seek ways to tailor those practices to their specific needs. So the Scrum Master's role shifts a bit from instructor to facilitator.
Exactly. They encourage experimentation within safe boundaries, helping the team test their understanding of Scrum and find what works best for them.
It's about guiding them to discover their own style within the framework.
And then finally they reach Re.
Read, the stage of true mastery.
Yes. Here, the team transcends strict adherence to the rules. They've internalized the principles and can adapt their approach to any situation. Just like a skilled martial artist, they act with instinct and expertise.
And the Scrum Master, just like Nanny McPhee, departs once the children have learned their lessons.
Exactly. The Scrum Master becomes dispensable but wanted.
That's a pretty inspiring vision of team development.
Yeah.
But let's be realistic. What of those times when a Scrum Master faces pushback, say from management demanding faster delivery, or stakeholders who don't quite grasp the Agile mindset? How do you navigate those organizational challenges?
That's where the tactful aspect of Level 5 leadership comes in. Watts tells a story about a team called the Blockheads who were facing, well, a pretty classic scenario. Unrealistic deadlines imposed by management.
Oh, I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
Management wants it yesterday, and they don't always understand the realities of Scrum.
Exactly. So the Blockheads create a realistic plan during sprint planning, taking into account their capacity and all that.
But management wasn't happy.
Not at all. They wanted more, faster.
So they were stuck between a rock and a hard place, trying to adhere to Scrum principles while facing external pressure.
It's a tough spot to be in, but their Scrum Master didn't cave.
Okay, good. What did they do? Did they fight back?
They took a more diplomatic approach. They calmly explained to management that the team was still new, still finding their rhythm.
Okay, so setting realistic expectations.
Exactly. They emphasized that early plans are often inaccurate, and giving the team space to establish their velocity would lead to better estimates and outcomes in the long run.
So it's about advocating for the team without being confrontational, educating those outside the team about how Scrum actually works.
Precisely. It's about explaining the value of self-organization and the potential pitfalls of compromising quality for those arbitrary deadlines.
It's about the long game, not just the short-term gains.
Right. Now, let's talk about a problem I'm sure many listeners have encountered, the elusive product owner.
Oh, I think we've all been there. The product owner is busy, unavailable, maybe doesn't fully understand their role in Scrum.
Watts calls this the product owner conundrum and uses a story to illustrate the real costs of poor product owner engagement.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me this story.
It involves a developer, Jimmy, and the product owner, Philip. Philip isn't the most accessible, always busy. You know the type.
Oh yeah, I've worked with a few Phillips in my time,
Well, the team's constantly struggling to get clear answers from Philip during the sprint.
which can lead to misunderstandings, rework, frustration.
Exactly, and that's precisely what happens. Jimmy develops a feature following the user story to the letter.
But during the sprint review,
Philip drops the bomb. That's not what I asked for.
oh no, I can feel the tension already.
Right. And technically, Jimmy did meet the requirements, but he missed the underlying intent of the feature.
Because he couldn't clarify with Philip during the sprint.
Exactly. So they have to roll back the feature, wasted effort, frustration all around.
That's rough. So how can Scrum Masters address this? Watts talks about using a proxy product owner, right?
He does. And it can be a helpful band-aid, especially when the real product owner is truly unavailable.
But it's not a perfect solution.
Right. There's always the risk of miscommunication or misinterpreting the product owner's vision.
So ideally, we want true collaboration between the business side and the development team, like the Agile Manifesto says.
Exactly. That's the goal.
But it can be tough to achieve when product owners have so many competing priorities. Any practical tips for Scrum Masters to ensure the team has access to the information they need?
Well, first and foremost, make sure those user stories are crystal clear.
Well-defined with clear acceptance criteria.
Exactly. That minimizes the need for constant clarification during the sprint. But even with perfect user stories, the team might still need input.
Right. Sometimes you just need to talk to the product owner.
And that's where the Scrum Master can step in, helping the product owner find ways to delegate tasks that don't require their direct involvement.
So freeing up their time for the things that truly matter.
Exactly. And the Scrum Master can also help them make a business case for dedicating more time to the team.
Highlighting the costs of being unavailable, wasted effort, delayed releases.
Exactly. It's about showing the value of that product owner involvement, not just assuming everyone gets it.
Now let's dig into a topic that can be a bit tricky. Holding each other accountable. Watts talks about the importance of working agreements and how easily they become meaningless if they're not actively upheld.
He tells this great anecdote about a team that created a no electronic distractions during meetings working agreement.
Sounds straightforward enough. No checking email, no scrolling through social media.
Exactly. But not even 30 minutes after agreeing to this, one team member, Janet, starts checking her email.
Oh no. The classic meeting faux pas. What did the Scrum Master do? Did they call out Janet directly?
He did something much more effective. He paused the meeting and addressed the whole team.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What did he say?
He said something like, "Hey, I've noticed we've already strayed from our working agreement. If I weren't here, how would you normally proceed?"
Wow, that's brilliant. He didn't shame Janet, but he shifted the responsibility for upholding the agreement from himself, the rule enforcer, to the entire team.
Exactly. It's so subtle, but it's so powerful.
It forces them to have an open and honest conversation about why they created the agreement in the first place and what needs to happen for them to feel comfortable holding each other accountable.
It becomes less about blindly following rules and more about creating a shared culture of respect and commitment.
And that leads to deeper understanding, a greater sense of ownership.
Absolutely. And Watts goes on to talk about building a feedback culture where constructive criticism is welcome and seen as a tool for growth.
Yeah, because feedback, when given and received well, can be incredibly valuable.
He introduces this simple but powerful model called AID.
AID, what's that stand for?
Actions, impacts, and desired outcomes.
Okay, I like it simple and to the point.
Right.
So when giving feedback, you focus on specific actions you observed, the impact those actions had, and the desired outcomes you'd like to see in the future.
Exactly. It's a clear and concise way to frame feedback without getting caught up in emotions or blame.
It takes the personal sting out of it, and on the receiving end, it encourages active listening, right?
Absolutely. Being open to different perspectives, fostering an environment where feedback is seen as a gift, an opportunity for learning and improvement.
Okay, I want to shift gears for a moment and talk about sprint length, a topic that always seems to spark debate. Is there a one-size-fits-all answer?
Watts argues there isn't. He tells a story about a team struggling with a 6-week sprint. finding it difficult to maintain focus and momentum over such a long period.
6 weeks. Yeah, that does seem like a long time to keep the energy up.
They're even tempted to extend the sprint to finish everything, but the Scrum Master wisely advises against it.
So extending a sprint, even to finish what's in progress, is generally a bad idea.
It disrupts the rhythm of delivery, which is so important for predictability and momentum. The key is finding a sprint length that balances getting things done with maintaining a sustainable pace.
Shorter sprints are often a good starting point, especially for new teams.
They allow for quicker feedback and adjustments. As the team matures and becomes more predictable, they can consider extending the sprint length, if it makes sense for their workflow.
It's about finding what works best for each team, not blindly following a rule.
Exactly. And the goal is to establish a consistent rhythm, a predictable cadence that allows the team to work sustainably.
And avoid burnout, which is so important in today's fast-paced world.
Absolutely. Now, here's a topic that might be a bit controversial. The sprint burn down chart. Watts actually asks, burn the burn down in the book.
Burn the burn down. Is he suggesting we abandon this classic Scrum tool?
Not necessarily. He's challenging the assumption that it's the only way to visually track progress.
Because it can become a source of frustration, especially when it's misused.
Exactly. Like when it's used as a management tool to micromanage the team instead of a team tool for self-management. Remember that story about the team that presented a fake burn down to avoid scrutiny?
Oh yeah, classic example of what can go wrong. So what's the alternative?
Watts encourages us to explore other ways to visualize progress that are more engaging and meaningful for the team. He tells a story about a team that came up with some creative options, like the pint graph and the weather forecast.
The pint graph and the weather forecast. Okay, those names definitely pique my curiosity.
So the pint graph involved physically drawing pints of beer on a whiteboard to represent tasks, crossing them off as they were completed.
I love that. It sounds like a way to make tracking progress more enjoyable, less daunting. What about the weather forecast?
They used weather symbols to represent the overall mood and progress of the sprint.
So like a sunny day meant things were going smoothly.
Exactly. While a thunderstorm might indicate some potential roadblocks, it was a more symbolic way to capture the team's overall feeling rather than just focusing on raw numbers.
It's fascinating how these alternatives move beyond just the data and incorporate the team's emotions and experiences.
It's about finding a way to visualize progress that resonates with the team. And speaking of things that resonate, let's talk about sprint goals.
Ah, yes. The heart of the sprint, Watts argues they're not just a nice to have, but essential for giving the team a sense of purpose and direction.
Absolutely. He tells the story of Team Speedwagon to make this point. They were a high-performing team, consistently delivering value to their product owner, Greg.
So they were doing well, but Watts is suggesting they could do even better.
Exactly. Their Scrum Master, Spencer, felt they could be even better and challenged them to find ways to deliver more value without sacrificing their sustainable pace.
Okay, that sounds like a tough challenge. How did they even approach that?
Spencer introduced this concept of Greg dollars, challenging the team to think about how they could maximize the amount of Greg dollars they delivered each sprint.
Greg dollars. So it's like a way to quantify the value they were delivering to the product owner.
Exactly. He reframed their focus from simply completing tasks to delivering tangible value aligned with Greg's priorities.
That's a clever way to align the team's efforts with the overall product vision. Did it work?
It did. It sparked a ton of creativity and problem solving, leading them to discover the power of sprint goals.
So they were looking beyond individual tasks, uncovering those synergies that could deliver more impactful outcomes.
Exactly. And it helped them make strategic decisions about their work.
Can you share any examples of their sprint goals?
One that stands out is getting to know you. They realized they had several lower priority tasks on the product backlog, all related to improving user communication and connection.
Okay, so not the most urgent tasks individually, but grouped together.
They had the potential to create a much more impactful and cohesive experience for users.
It's amazing how a well-crafted sprint goal can unlock that hidden value.
And there are different approaches to forming sprint goals, as Watts points out. Sometimes they emerge organically, like in that getting to know you example.
Other times they might be driven by a broader product theme, like focusing on security or performance.
Right. And some teams even use metaphors for their sprint goals.
Metaphors, like what? Give me an example.
They get pretty creative. Think of naming a sprint after a sports team, a movie, a song title, or even a type of food.
That's fun. It makes the goal more memorable and less robotic.
Exactly. It injects some personality and makes the work more meaningful.
Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to talk about another crucial aspect of Scrum, the definition of done.
Ah, yes. The infamous definition of done. So important to get this right.
Watts emphasizes having a clear and comprehensive definition of done to avoid the pitfalls of what he calls Scrummerfall,
Oh, I like that term scrummerful. It perfectly captures that all too common scenario.
where teams are supposedly doing Scrum, but they're still stuck in that waterfall mindset.
Exactly. He tells the story of the Doomsday Bunnies, a new team excited about using Scrum but running into a classic problem, the developer-tester handoff.
Ah, yes, the classic siloed approach. Developers write code, testers find bugs, but they're not truly working together as a team
Which creates a bottleneck, delays, and lots of frustration.
because the testers are always a sprint behind the developers.
And the team struggles to deliver a potentially releasable increment at the end of each sprint.
So it defeats the whole purpose of Scrum. How did their Scrum Master help them overcome this?
He challenged them to rethink their approach to testing. Instead of viewing testing as a separate phase to find defects, he encouraged them to integrate testing throughout the sprint.
So shifting from finding bugs to building quality in from the start.
Exactly. He encouraged them to explore engineering practices like test-driven development or TDD.
Where tests are written before the code, forcing you to think about quality and functionality from the very beginning.
It leads to a much more collaborative and efficient workflow.
And it ensures that potentially releasable increment.
Precisely. And speaking of showcasing that increment, Watts argues that the sprint review should be much more than a passive demonstration of completed work. He shares a story about a Scrum Master who encourages the product owner to lead the demonstration instead of the developers.
Interesting. What was the reasoning behind that?
This Scrum Master I saw recognized that the product owner, Diego, had a deeper understanding of the user needs and how the product would actually be used.
So by having Diego lead, it shifted the focus from the technical details to the value being delivered.
Exactly. It brought a fresh perspective and often led to much more insightful feedback.
It's about showcasing the why behind the work, not just the what.
Precisely. And it sparked more collaboration between the product owner, stakeholders, and the development team.
I love these insights into making the most of each Scrum event. But you know what I'm curious about? That unconventional sprint review Watts describes, where the team had donuts, fruit, drinks. It sounded more like a celebration than a typical review.
Ah, yes. The Trigger Happy Bunnies team. They shook things up, inviting a wider range of stakeholders and creating a more welcoming and collaborative atmosphere.
Because they understood that celebrating successes is just as important as analyzing areas for improvement.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We have, but we've only scratched the surface of Scrum Mastery.
There's so much more to explore.
Absolutely. We'll be diving into some of the more nuanced aspects of Scrum Mastery next time, including dealing with challenging team dynamics and navigating those organizational roadblocks.
Join us for part 2, everyone, as we continue to unpack the wisdom of Scrum Mastery and equip you with even more practical tools to level up your Scrum journey.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Scrum Mastery. Before we jump into specific challenges and techniques, we were talking about making Scrum events more engaging and productive. But engagement often starts with a good conversation, and Watts points out that a key differentiator between good and great Scrum Masters is the art of asking the right questions.
This is interesting to me. I've always thought of myself as someone who loves to ask questions, but I've never considered it as a specific skill.
Yeah.
What makes the questions of a great Scrum Master stand out?
Watts makes a distinction between asking to understand and asking so the team can understand. A good Scrum Master might ask questions to clarify a situation or to gather information, to get a better handle on what's happening.
Okay, so it's more about information gathering.
In a way, but a great Scrum Master uses questions as a tool to help the team uncover their own understanding.
Ah, so it's not about leading them to a specific answer or solution.
Exactly. It's about guiding their thought process, encouraging them to think critically, challenge assumptions, and come up with creative solutions that they truly own.
I see. Thinking back to that anecdote about teams naturally electing a Scrum Master, could it be that they gravitate towards people who are skilled at asking these kinds of thought-provoking questions?
It's very possible. Those individuals may not always have all the answers, but they know how to facilitate a discussion that leads to deeper understanding and self-discovery within the team.
Right. It's about the process, not just the outcome.
Exactly. And it speaks to the core of servant leadership, creating an environment where everyone feels empowered to contribute and find solutions together.
Okay, let's say I'm a Scrum Master who wants to develop this skill of asking insightful questions. Where do I even begin?
Watts suggests starting by paying close attention to the types of questions you're asking. Are they closed questions that only elicit a yes or no response, or are they open-ended questions that encourage deeper reflection?
So being mindful of the kind of response you're trying to elicit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And are you inadvertently steering the team towards a particular solution, or are you helping them explore a range of possibilities?
It's about being mindful of the intention behind the question and ensuring it's truly serving the team's growth and development.
Precisely. And equally important is listening deeply to the team's responses. It's not just about asking the right questions, but truly hearing and understanding what they have to say. He even encourages Scrum Masters to practice empathic listening.
Empathic listening. That sounds interesting. What does that involve?
It means trying to see the situation from the team's perspective, understanding not just their intellectual response, but also their emotional state.
Okay, so tuning into their feelings as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What are their underlying concerns? What unspoken anxieties might be influencing their contributions?
It sounds like this requires a lot of self-awareness and a genuine desire to connect with the team on a deeper level.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
And this ability to connect with the team's emotional landscape ties into another key quality of a great Scrum Master that Watts highlights, being illuminating.
Okay, illuminating. I like the sound of that. But what does it mean in a practical sense?
An illuminating Scrum Master can reflect back to the team what they're seeing and hearing, helping them to see their own strengths and weaknesses more clearly. It's like holding up a mirror to the team.
Providing them with a fresh perspective, helping them connect the dots.
Exactly. It involves paying close attention to the team's dynamics, their interactions, successes, struggles.
So it's about being observant.
Very observant, listening not only to what's being said, but also to what's left unsaid.
Reading between the lines.
Exactly. And then sharing your observations in a way that's constructive, non-judgmental, and empowering.
It sounds like a delicate balance, knowing when to offer insights, how to phrase them so they're received positively, and when to simply listen and observe.
It is a balance, but it's a balance worth striving for. It's about being supportive and challenging simultaneously, celebrating the team's strengths while helping them acknowledge areas for growth.
Now, one of the more intriguing concepts in Watts' book is the idea that a great Scrum Master is also disruptive. That seems a bit counterintuitive, doesn't it? Are we trying to create stability and predictability within the Scrum framework?
Watts argues that true agility requires a willingness to challenge the status quo, to shake things up, to push boundaries.
So it's not about blindly following the rules.
Exactly. A great Scrum Master isn't afraid to rock the boat a little, to question established norms, to advocate for change, even when faced with resistance.
I can see how that can be beneficial, but how do you disrupt effectively without creating chaos or alienating people?
That's where the tactful aspect of level 5 leadership comes in again. It's about being strategic and discerning with your disruption.
Okay, picking your battles.
Exactly. Pick your battles wisely. Find ways to influence change without resorting to force or confrontation.
Can you give me an example of what disruptive might look like in a real-world scenario?
Imagine a Scrum Master who's frustrated with a company-mandated tool that the team finds clunky and inefficient.
Okay, I think we've all encountered those tools that seem to hinder more than help.
This Scrum Master recognizes that the tool is a major impediment to the team's productivity and morale. Her first attempt is to go through official channels, trying to secure budget for a better tool, but she's met with resistance.
So what does she do? Give up?
Not at all. She gets creative and asks the team if they'd be willing to, get this, create their own tool.
Wow, that's thinking outside the box. It's a bit rebellious, but in a good way. It shows initiative and a commitment to finding a solution that works for everyone.
Exactly. It's about understanding the principles behind Scrum so you can make informed decisions about when to bend the rules and when to stand firm.
This reminds me of another key principle we talked about, the importance of rhythm and sustainable pace. We talked earlier about sprint length, finding the right cadence for the team.
Yes, and Watts takes that concept further. He argues that Scrum Masters need to help their teams find a rhythm that allows them to deliver value consistently without burning out.
So it's not just about speed. It's about sustainability.
Exactly. He uses the analogy of a heartbeat, a steady and reliable pulse that keeps the team moving forward without overexertion.
I love that analogy. It's about finding a pace that's both productive and healthy, sustainable for the long haul.
And how does a Scrum Master help the team discover that rhythm? By paying close attention to the team's energy levels, their workload, their overall well-being.
So it's about observation, communication, being in tune with the team's needs.
Exactly. Encourage breaks, celebrate successes, reflect on challenges, and consistently advocate for a sustainable pace, even when there's pressure to deliver faster.
It's about recognizing that pushing people beyond their limits is ultimately counterproductive. It might yield short-term gains, but it can lead to burnout and diminished performance in the long run.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot between productivity and sustainability, pushing for results while safeguarding the team's well-being.
Now, I want to explore a topic that can be quite sensitive. Team dynamics. Watts talks about creating a safe and supportive environment where team members feel comfortable being open and honest with each other.
He uses the term safety to describe an environment where people feel free to express their ideas, disagree respectfully, and make mistakes without fear of reprisal. This can be incredibly difficult to achieve, especially in organizations with a culture of blame or fear of failure.
Absolutely. People can become so guarded, worried about making a mistake or being perceived as incompetent. It can really stifle creativity and collaboration.
Watts believes that great Scrum Masters are skilled at creating this sense of safety, both through their actions and their words. They model vulnerability, encourage open communication, and celebrate diversity of thought.
Can you give me some specific examples of how a Scrum Master might foster this sense of safety?
Let's consider a team called the Jedis who are struggling to collaborate effectively. One member, Avis, is consistently late for meetings, distracted, and not engaged at the work.
Okay, I think we've all encountered team members like Avis at some point. It can be so frustrating. What does the Scrum Master do in this situation? Publicly call out Avis.
The Scrum Master, Daryl, takes a subtler approach. During the sprint retrospective, he asks the seemingly innocuous question: how did you think the daily scrums worked for you this sprint?
Ah, I see where this is going. It seems simple, but there's a strategy behind it.
Avis responds by saying that he found the daily scrums very useful because they allowed him to catch up on what everyone else was doing.
So he's basically admitting that he's not paying attention during the sprint and relying on the daily scrum to get up to speed.
Right. But instead of criticizing Avis, Daryl makes a brilliant move. He simply asks, what about everyone else? Were they useful for everyone?
Okay, the tension is building.
The rest of the team hesitates at first, but then they start to open up. They talk about how frustrating it is to have Avis consistently show up late and unprepared, and how it disrupts the team's flow.
By asking that one question, Daryl has shifted the focus from individual blame to a team-wide discussion. It's brilliant.
It is. And from there, the team can brainstorm solutions together. Maybe they implement a system of consequences for latecomers, or they have a one-on-one conversation with Avis to understand what's preventing him from fully engaging with the team's work.
It's a powerful example of how to address a sensitive issue without resorting to blame or judgment. It all started with a well-crafted question that opened the door for honest conversation.
And Watts stresses that this takes courage, both from the Scrum Master and the team members. It's about being vulnerable, admitting weaknesses, and trusting that the team will support each other through challenges. This ties into another quality of a great Scrum Master, being nurturing.
Nurturing. That seems like such an important quality, especially when you're dealing with sensitive team dynamics. What does it mean in the context of Scrum?
It means being invested in the growth and development of each team member, as well as the team as a whole. It's about fostering an environment where people feel supported, encouraged, and challenged to reach their full potential.
It sounds like a blend of mentorship and positive reinforcement, recognizing strengths while providing the tools and resources to overcome weaknesses.
Exactly. And it's about believing in the team, even when they're doubting themselves. Watts argues that great Scrum Masters have unwavering faith in their team's ability to achieve great things, and they communicate that belief through their words and actions.
It reminds me of that saying, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Belief is powerful. Now let's talk about performance management. It's a topic that often feels at odds with the collaborative spirit of Scrum.
Watts argues that traditional performance reviews can be detrimental to teamwork and that great Scrum Masters find ways to work around them.
I've definitely seen that play out in organizations where performance reviews create competition rather than collaboration. Everyone starts focusing on their individual goals, and the team suffers. What's the alternative? How can a Scrum Master navigate that?
Watts tells a story about a team dreading their upcoming performance reviews, worried about being judged individually, and concerned that the process will create competition. The Scrum Master recognizes that he can't ignore the company's process, but he also knows it's not serving the team's best interests.
So he's in a bit of a bind.
He is. So he challenges the team to find a way to fulfill the requirements of the performance reviews while staying true to their values of teamwork and collaboration.
Okay, so it's about taking ownership of the process and making it work for them instead of letting it dictate their behavior.
Exactly. What they do is work together to identify shared goals that align with the project objectives. They also agree to provide feedback to each other throughout the sprint rather than waiting for a formal review process.
So they're creating a more continuous feedback loop, which is more in line with the Agile mindset.
Exactly. And it's about creating a process that supports both individual growth and team cohesion.
That's a great example of how to turn a potentially divisive process into an opportunity for collaboration and shared success. It's about focusing on the we rather than the me. Now, I think we need to address one of the most challenging aspects of Scrum Mastery, dealing with conflict. It's something most of us try to avoid, but Watts argues that it can actually be a positive force.
He uses the analogy of a pressure cooker. If you try to suppress the pressure, it will eventually explode. But if you allow for a controlled release, it can be harnessed to create something delicious.
So, conflict, when handled skillfully, can lead to growth, innovation, and stronger relationships.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to channel that conflict into something productive. It does take practice, though.
I can imagine. Where do you even start?
It starts with creating a safe environment where people feel comfortable expressing their disagreements and working through them respectfully.
So, going back to that idea of psychological safety.
Exactly. Active listening and empathy are crucial here. Try to understand the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree with it.
It's about finding that common ground, that shared understanding that allows you to move forward together.
Exactly. And Watts offers some practical tips for navigating conflict effectively.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Focus on the problem, not the person. Use I statements to express your own feelings and needs without placing blame or judgment on others.
Okay, this is all great advice for handling conflict within the team. But what about those situations where the conflict involves someone who is consistently disruptive or negative? Is there ever a point where you need to remove that person from the team, even if they're a top performer?
Watts addresses this head-on, using a story about the Denver Nuggets basketball team to illustrate the importance of removing disruptive influences. Carmelo Anthony was a star player, but his behavior was creating tension and negativity. When they traded him away, it was like a breath of fresh air for the entire team.
So sometimes letting go of a star, even if it seems counterintuitive, can actually be the best thing for the team. But that's a tough decision to make. How can a Scrum Master know when it's necessary to take that step?
It's about weighing the individual's contributions against their impact on the team's overall health and well-being. If their behavior is consistently undermining the team's ability to function effectively, it might be necessary to make a change, even if it seems like a loss in the short term.
It's about prioritizing the collective good over individual performance, even if it's a difficult decision. Now, I want to talk about a topic that's absolutely fundamental to being an effective Scrum Master, and that's communication.
It's more than just encouraging people to talk to each other. It's about truly listening and understanding what others have to say.
It's a reminder that communication is a two-way street. It's not just about expressing our own thoughts and ideas, but also about receiving and understanding the messages of others.
Watts encourages Scrum Masters to practice empathic listening, which involves trying to see the situation from the other person's perspective and understanding their emotional state as well as their intellectual response.
So taking into account both the head and the heart.
Exactly. And Watts also talks about being mindful of our communication style. Are we being clear and concise, or are we rambling and confusing people?
Are we conveying our message in a respectful and supportive way? Or are we coming across as dismissive or judgmental?
It's about being aware of how our words, both spoken and written, are being received, especially in today's world where so much of our interaction happens through email, chat, and messaging.
It's more important than ever to be mindful of our online communication. Now, I'm curious about a specific communication challenge that Watts addresses in the book. The dreaded yes, but response can be so frustrating to be in a brainstorming session where every suggestion is met with negativity and resistance.
He argues that great Scrum Masters find ways to turn those objections into opportunities for collaboration. He tells this anecdote about a team brainstorming solutions to a problem, and one team member, Jim, keeps shutting down every suggestion with a yes, but response.
I can practically hear his voice. Yes, but that won't work because, yes, but we don't have the resources. Yes, but it's too risky.
And it's starting to drain the team's energy. But here's where Sarah, the Scrum Master, steps in. Instead of getting frustrated or arguing with Jim, she starts taking notes.
Notes. What kind of notes is she taking?
She's not just writing down the suggestions, she's also noting the type of response each suggestion elicits. So next to Jim's yes but responses, she might write something like, blocks the suggestion without offering an alternative. And next to other team members' more positive responses, she might note things like offers a different perspective or builds on the previous suggestion.
So she's creating a visual record of the team's communication patterns.
Exactly. And at the end of the brainstorming session, she shares her observations with the team. She points out how Jim's yes, but responses are shutting down the conversation and preventing them from finding creative solutions.
I imagine that was an eye-opening experience for Jim and maybe even a bit uncomfortable.
It probably was, but it creates an opportunity for the team to have an honest conversation about their communication style and how they can work together more effectively. Watts argues that this shift from yes, but to yes, and is crucial for fostering a culture of collaboration and innovation.
It's a subtle but important shift. Instead of immediately focusing on the reasons why something won't work, you acknowledge the suggestion and then build upon it.
Right. It's about recognizing that everyone has something valuable to contribute, even if their initial suggestion isn't perfect. And it's about creating a space where ideas can be explored and refined collaboratively.
This ties back to that quality of a great Scrum Master being alternative, right? Being willing to challenge the status quo and find those creative solutions that might not be immediately obvious.
Watts uses alternative to describe a Scrum Master who is comfortable thinking outside the box, experimenting with new approaches, pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
It's about being a bit of a maverick, a trailblazer, someone who isn't afraid to go against the grain.
And it often leads to breakthroughs. Can I share an example? Please do.
Imagine a team whose sprint reviews are getting bogged down in technical details. The developers give these lengthy, complicated demonstrations, and the stakeholders are completely lost.
Oh, I've been in those sprint reviews. It can feel like watching paint dry sometimes.
So, the Scrum Master, Christian, decides to try something different. He asks the team if they'd be willing to let the product owner lead the demonstration instead.
Interesting. What's the thinking behind that?
Christian recognizes that the product owner, Roxy, has a deeper understanding of the user needs and how the product will actually be used. By having Roxy lead, the focus shifts from the technical details to the value being delivered.
It's about showcasing the why behind the work, not just the what.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it turns out to be a huge success. Roxy explains the features in a way everyone understands, and the stakeholders are much more engaged. It's a win-win. That's a great example of how thinking outside the box can lead to better outcomes. It's about challenging assumptions and trying something new, even if it feels a bit unconventional. Now, speaking of unconventional, you mentioned a story about a rapping flight attendant earlier. What does that have to do with Scrum Mastery?
Ah, yes. David, the Southwest Airlines flight attendant who turned the pre-flight safety announcement into a rap song. Watts uses this story to illustrate the importance of finding creative ways to engage people and make even mundane tasks more enjoyable.
Okay, that's brilliant. I can only imagine the passengers' reactions.
They loved it. It was unexpected, entertaining, and it actually made them pay attention to the safety information. Watts argues that great Scrum Masters can learn a lot from this approach.
So it's about finding ways to make Scrum events more engaging, to inject some fun and personality into the process.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be dry and robotic. It can be fun and engaging, and that can make a big difference in team morale and productivity.
Okay, before we move on, I want to address something that I think is on the minds of a lot of listeners, and that's the topic of money. Scrum, as a framework, doesn't really have built-in reward systems. How can Scrum Masters motivate their teams beyond just financial incentives?
It's a great question, and it's something that Watts explores in detail. He tells a story about a workshop where he asked participants, suppose at the end of a project, your boss comes to you and says, great job, that was impressive. I want to recognize your effort, but I don't know how can I reward you? Name it. What would you say?
So he's essentially asking them, what would truly make you feel valued and appreciated?
Exactly. And the responses he received were fascinating. While some people did mention money or time off, many talked about things like recognition, autonomy, and the opportunity to make a meaningful contribution.
It's a good reminder that motivation often goes beyond just the financial reward.
It does. Watts argues that great Scrum Masters understand this and find ways to create an environment where people feel intrinsically motivated, where they're passionate about their work and proud of what they're achieving.
And I imagine that leads to higher levels of engagement, job satisfaction, and ultimately better outcomes for everyone involved.
Absolutely. It's about creating a work environment where people feel valued, respected, and empowered to do their best work.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the art of asking the right questions to the power of disruption and the importance of nurturing a safe and supportive team environment.
It's been an insightful journey through Scrum Mastery so far.
But there's still more to come.
Definitely. We'll be delving into some of the more nuanced aspects of Scrum Mastery in our final segment, including dealing with difficult personalities, navigating organizational roadblocks, and finding ways to continuously improve our own skills as Scrum Masters.
It sounds like we have a lot more to unpack.
Yep.
Join us next time for the final part of our deep dive into Scrum Mastery. We've covered so much ground in our exploration of Scrum Mastery, from the importance of asking the right questions to the art of fostering a safe and supportive team environment. But I'm eager to delve into something we touched on earlier, navigating organizational roadblocks. I think we've all hit those walls at some point in our Scrum journey. So let's get tactical. What specific strategies does Watts offer for dealing with resistance to Scrum within the larger organization?
Watts emphasizes the importance of understanding the why behind the resistance. He suggests kind of playing detective. Before charging in with solutions, take a step back.
Gather clues, right. Figure out the root cause of the resistance.
Exactly. Is it a lack of understanding about Scrum? Fear of change? A conflict of interests? Once you have a clearer picture of what you're dealing with, you can tailor your approach.
Makes sense. So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Definitely not. Watts recommends using data and evidence to support your case for change. Demonstrate those tangible benefits of Scrum,
Show, don't tell.
Right. And find allies within the organization, people who are already on board with the Agile mindset.
It's about building bridges, finding that common ground, and showing how Scrum can benefit not just the team, but the entire organization. We've talked a lot about specific techniques and strategies, but it seems like a lot of Scrum Mastery ultimately boils down to mindset. What are some of the core beliefs that Watts emphasizes?
One of the most powerful ideas in the book is the concept of having belief, this unwavering belief in the team's potential, even when the team themselves are doubting their abilities.
It reminds me of that Henry Ford quote, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Exactly. And Watts shares this great story about a team called the Dominoes. They were labeled the problem team, because of their history of struggling with quality issues, missed deadlines.
Oof, that's a tough label to shake off. It must have been demoralizing for the team. How did their Scrum Master help them turn things around?
Their Scrum Master, Paris, made a conscious decision to focus on the team's strengths rather than their weaknesses. She saw that they were meticulous planners, they took calculated risks, and they genuinely cared about delivering a high-quality product.
So she shifted the narrative, helped them to see themselves in a more positive light.
Exactly. And this shift in mindset had a profound impact. The Dominoes started believing in themselves again, and that belief translated into better results. They went from being the problem team to a high-performing team that consistently delivered value.
It's an inspiring story, and it's a powerful reminder that as Scrum Masters, we have a huge influence on the team's beliefs about themselves and their capabilities. Our words and actions can shape their reality.
Absolutely. And Watts also emphasizes the importance of embracing failure as an opportunity for learning. Create a safe environment where team members feel comfortable experimenting, making mistakes, and learning from those experiences.
It's a core principle of Scrum, right? Empiricism.
Ah,
The idea that we learn and adapt based on what we observe and experience.
exactly. It's about shifting from a culture of blame to a culture of continuous improvement.
Mistakes are inevitable, but they're valuable learning opportunities if we approach them with a growth mindset.
Okay, before we wrap up our deep dive into Scrum Mastery, I want to touch on something that's often overlooked. The Scrum Master's own self-care.
Oh, this is so important. I think a lot of us who are naturally drawn to helping roles can struggle with this. We pour so much energy into supporting others that we forget to fill our own cups.
Watts dedicates a whole section to this, recognizing that being a Scrum Master can be incredibly demanding both emotionally and mentally.
You're constantly navigating challenges, facilitating difficult conversations, advocating for change. It's easy to burn out if you're not taking care of yourself.
He encourages Scrum Masters to find ways to recharge their batteries, whether it's meditation, exercise, spending time in nature, or simply taking a few moments each day to disconnect and de-stress.
Finding ways to replenish your energy is crucial for sustainable success.
It's not selfish, it's essential. When we prioritize our own well-being, we're better equipped to support our teams and guide them toward achieving their full potential.
Well, it seems we've unearthed a treasure trove of wisdom in our deep dive into Scrum Mastery.
It's been a fantastic exploration. Scrum Mastery, From Good to Great Servant Leadership by Geoff Watts, is a must-read for anyone looking to elevate their Scrum game.
If there's one key takeaway I hope our listeners grasp, it's that Scrum Mastery is an ongoing journey, not a destination. It's about constantly learning, growing, and evolving, embracing the challenges and the rewards of servant leadership, and ultimately finding joy in helping teams unlock their full potential.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Keep those brains buzzing and those curiosity gears turning. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic that's sure to expand your horizons. Until then, happy learning.